Your girl is trying. And if you're trying, you're doing something. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Marie. In a recent video, I talked about some of the zero waste habits that I practiced at the peak of the zero waste movement that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole today. That I don't do anymore, either because they are incredibly impractical, just actually not sustainable at all, or just really doesn't make a difference, just makes your life miserable. There were some examples. So I thought today, why not do the opposite? So today I want to talk about some of the things that I still do that came from or came out of my zero waste lifestyle and involvement with the zero waste movement that I still do today. I don't believe in a lot of the stuff that happened within the movement. I think it was very focused on aesthetics. I think it was hyper focusing on some very, very small aspects of environmental and climate action. And I think it completely ignored the fact that we need bigger structural changes in order to reach our climate goals, and that we cannot put all the responsibility on consumers. That is, in every sense of the word, not sustainable. Even though I don't believe in something being perfectly zero waste, and I don't believe that perfect zero waste actually exists anywhere, there's still a lot of more practical habits that came out of this lifestyle that I still do every day. There are tons of things that you can do, and I think it's very important to not discourage consumers from taking personal action. I think individual action is extremely important. It's just not the only thing that's important. But let's talk about some of the things that are zero waste that I still do, even though I might not believe in the zero waste movement as it was. First of all, I still love to go to my farmer's market. It is one of the highlights of my week when I'm home and I get to go to the market. You get to buy seasonal, local, package-free produce. You get to talk to the people that actually grew your food. And I think that is an incredibly valuable thing. When it comes to food, I would never say that seasonal and local produce is always the most sustainable choice. It isn't necessarily. It depends on how that local produce was grown. And in many cases, imported goods might actually still have a lower carbon footprint than produce that's grown more locally. It always depends. So this isn't to glamorize a certain way of eating. It isn't necessarily so black and white. And how long your food is transported and how it's packaged is nowhere near as impactful as what that food is, which means that plants are predominantly a plant-based diet, ultimately the way to go. But one of the things that I have learned from my experience with the farmers market, one of the things that I still enjoy very much, is going there, is talking to the farmers, is talking about the seasons, is talking about how we can use different types of produce in new ways. We're sharing experiences and opinions, and it's just really inspiring. And I think a really important thing here, because food waste is a massive global problem, right? So it's about 1/3 of all food that is wasted. And a lot of that food waste happens in individual households. Understanding the impact and the resources and the effort it takes to grow food. And when you understand the effort that goes into producing something, you're just much less likely to throw it away on a whim. So understanding where our food comes from in terms of understanding the resources behind it is just really important. I don't obsess over having all my food always be packaged or plastic free. That is unrealistic. That is an unattainable goal. But I try to keep it at a minimum. And when I know I can get something without packaging or with a less amount of packaging, I will always go for that option if that option is available, but I won't beat myself up if that option is not available. I hope that makes sense. I just love my farmer's market, and on a more personal level, it's just a really nice ritual to have in the middle of your week. So I go with my little wicker basket, I get all my package-free stuff, and then I buy the stuff I can't buy at the farmer's market. I buy at a regular grocery store and call it a day. I still reuse packaging every single way that I can. I am not one to throw out something that could potentially have a purpose. Some people would call that a hoarder. I would call that being sustainable. So with the zero waste movement, one of the things that it really taught me was how to look at resources, how to see the potential and purpose in resources that would otherwise just be headed for the bin, would be headed for landfill or headed for a waste incinerator, which means that I save a lot of material, I save a lot of packaging and a lot of different containers, and I reuse them and I repurpose them every single place in my home. And I guess one of the major ones being that I reuse food packaging instead of using it as a single-use material, I reuse it as food packaging just for something else. So like a plastic hummus container could then contain solid spices, but it also means that I find shit on the beach and I try to turn it into home decor. Food containers, napkins from restaurants, if I haven't really used it, I'll take that home and reuse it some other time. Gift wrapping, ribbons, like greeting cards, all that kind of stuff isn't necessarily broken just because it's been used once. There's still plenty of ways of using it. I use old chopsticks from takeout in my plants to hold them steady. All that kind of stuff was something that I learned during my zero waste journey that I still do every single day. I think one of the more visual representations of the zero waste movement was the pantry, was the beautiful glass jars with the beautiful bulk items inside. And I don't have a bulk store, and I feel like I mention it in every single video, but then sometimes I don't mention it and people ask, why don't you go to a bulk store? And I like, I don't have one, I'm sorry. Your girl is trying, and if you're trying, you're doing something, so that's great. But I still have the pantry with the glass jars, and it's still on display. And it's not in a sort of, well, it's pretty and I need it for Instagram way. There is a purpose to it. It's also pretty for Instagram. But so first of all, I spent years thrifting jars for this fucking pantry. So I'm not just going to discard all the jars because I don't necessarily have the same kind of use for them anymore. But there's also the notion that putting your things into a solid container, dried goods like flour, sugar, pasta, that kind of stuff, putting it into a solid container rather than having it be in those flimsy cardboard boxes and stuff, will ultimately eliminate the contamination of pests. And if I just put it in its paper bag into my cupboard, those pests are gonna spread into all my other stuff. But when you contain it in a sealed glass jar, it's not really going anywhere. So you can catch the problem much earlier, and thus you avoid throwing away a lot of your food. So I still use the solid containers, and I still use the aesthetic zero waste pantry, but more so it's because that once you have had pests come home with you from a store, you're not going back. So one thing that is perhaps less practical and more so a mentality shift or a mindset is the type of curiosity that the zero waste movement and the zero waste lifestyle inspired from. Seeking out information about impact, about waste management, as well as waste prevention efforts, and even more so what is happening currently politically. So understanding, and that is sort of the basis of the zero waste lifestyle, is just really packed in with a lot of really sparkly, flashy, reusable bits. But the core essence of it is that you as a consumer have a massive impact, a massive responsibility, and that you are massively important. And although you're not alone with that responsibility, and there are other kinds of responsibilities, it is empowering in the way that it tells you that you can do something, and that is absolutely motherfucking true. The information that this lifestyle inspired me to seek out and research has created the foundation that is now the foundation of my general climate and environmental activism. The idea that we have not only planetary tipping points, but we also have social tipping points. So the planetary tipping points mean that at some point there is going to have been a kind of development, in our case it's detrimental, that creates a ripple effect that cannot be stopped. That is why we're talking about the temperature increase of 1.5 Celsius, and why we're talking about in the future it cannot go past 2 degrees Celsius. That is a planetary tipping point. If that happens, tons of other shit is going to happen and we won't be able to stop it. When we're talking about social tipping points, that is where zero waste, as well as any kind of environmental advocacy, is important, is that when enough people believe something that is going to make a difference, that is going to make a change. Consumers can only be as sustainable as the society they live within would allow them to. And when you advocate for environmentalism and climate action, what you often realize is that you're running your head against a wall so many times, because the system that's set in place is not set in place with sustainability in mind. The way that we have in the past thought about resources affects how our society is built today. It affects our mentality towards resources. It affects the kind of legislation that comes out that need to protect or utilize, some would say exploit, but resources. But, and this is the important bit, just because that there is a certain framework for how sustainable consumers can be, when enough consumers want something, the world changes for it. Does that make sense? Yes, there are politicians with brains the size of peas. Yes, there are billionaires. Yes, there are multi-billion-dollar corporations. But what we think and how we act matters. So when I started my zero waste journey, my main focus was plastic. I wanted to avoid all kinds of plastic, specifically single-use plastic, or more so single-use plastic, but really I demonized every single type of plastic that was out there. And today I realized that, well, plastic is really smart material. We just use it in really dumb ways. We have previously, we still are to many extents, but we're getting smarter with it. But a direct consequence of trying to avoid single-use plastic was that I didn't buy tons of stuff because of the way it was packaged. I went from trend spotting and impulse shopping. I went from having kind of a high consumption to having practically no consumption for vast periods of time. No consumption, like I had food, but I didn't buy anything on a whim. I didn't buy anything on impulse. I thrifted a fair bit, but there's so many things I didn't buy. Big things like snacks I was kind of curious about, but it was wrapped in plastic, so I wouldn't go for it. And bigger things, like things from my home that was wrapped in plastic, so I couldn't buy that. Now today I understand that impact and how we purchase and use goods is more complex than plastic bad, no plastic good. There's more to it. But it's still a habit that sits incredibly naturally with me, that I don't buy things on a whim. If I do, it feels almost like an extreme sport. It feels almost like, okay. It means that you're not buying things on a whim that ends up not being great purchases. It means that the things that I buy are things that I can see myself use, wear, enjoy for years and not just short term. And that is the most powerful thing you can do as a consumer at this point. Buying less crap, buying what you need, sure, but buying beyond what you need and buying things that you honestly don't really have that big of an attachment to. Just buying things because you can, buying things for leisure, buying things as, you know, like a free time shopping activity, all that kind of jazz. Tiny thing, but honestly, one of the best pieces of advice when it comes to lowering our impact: buy less crap. I wouldn't just sit here and talk shit about zero waste because it's my stepping stone. It's my starting point when looking at global climate issues and local environmentalist issues. It's an important part of a much bigger equation. That being said, what this lifestyle looks like for me today is vastly different from when I started out, and I think for the better. Let me know down below if you have been through a similar journey, changed your lifestyle, or maybe gotten yourself a reality check. What some of the things that you're hanging on to that still make sense to do, and what are some of the things that you have let go of? If you want to see what kind of habits I no longer do from the zero waste lifestyle, I'll link the other video down below so you can go and check it out. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day and see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye.